Cassandra is a member of the Victorian Police Force since 1996. Cassie's predominantly worked in the southern region at Dandenong, Narre Warren, Cranbourne and Springvale uniform. She's worked in general duties at all ranks up to the senior sergeant level. In addition, she's worked at Frankston Sexual Offences and Child Abuse Unit and at the Media Unit. Prior to being promoted as an Eastern Family Violence Training Officer, she worked teaching recruits law and policy in the Foundation Training Division at People Development Command. So she's training police recruits. Cassie became a subject matter expert in family violence after working as the Family Violence Liaison Officer at Dandenong Police Station, followed by almost 3 years as the Southern Metropolitan Area, that's Casey in the Greater Dandenong Area, Family Violence Court Liaison Officer at Dandenong Magistrates Court. So Cassie's going to come and talk to us about how the police see these sorts of things. Okay, so I as well would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands past, present and emerging, which, so my notes that I've been making as I go along really is highlighted with the what's the word? Thank you, trauma that is felt by our Aboriginals, that is passed on and on. So I just wanted to make that link in, which I've tried to link something that everybody has said through my, my presentation. So my role as a Eastern Family Violence Training Officer is to lift the capability of our frontline police members on how they respond to family violence, because we haven't always got it right. And there was a Family Violence Royal Commission, you probably all know this, in 2015, coming out of, well, one of them was the Luke Batty inquest, and they looked into three inquests. One was Luke Batty and two other were adult females with children who were murdered by their partners. Out of that came 232, I think, or 233 recommendations, of which around 40 were directed directly at the police. And since then, we've changed a lot of our ways and a lot of our views, and one of them is the training. So police, prior to a couple of years ago out at the academy, never had any kind of family violence training. So my job and one of my challenges is your senior constable, your leading senior constable, and dare I say, your crusty sergeants that are out there that have been on the road for 15, 20 years, like I was, still have the same or some views of family violence, and they victim blame. And I'm challenging that culture and trying to change that culture through our training. So every police member is receiving a minimum of 3 hours training by myself. Well, there's 23 of me across the state, and we have to cover 20,000 members. So I started in June, and I've done around 550 in the eastern area. And another colleague who works down this way, Fiona Colkin, has done similar. So we're certainly plugging our way at doing that and changing that. And you can see a shift. They created, the Royal Commission created a new form, and it's a family violence risk assessment form that has 39 questions on it that police have to ask every victim at every family violence incident they go to. And it is a risk assessment form, and it is derived from the MARAM, and you would have heard what the MARAM is, Kylie, and it's this document here. It's the Family Violence Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Management Framework. It is a public document, and it's what all of our agencies work from. It highlights in there all the high-risk factors that all the agencies and all the police now look at. So it is an amazing document in that it gives you examples of what these high-risk factors are, and our police are now being trained to look for those high-risk factors. So you can get that online if you want. We're also governed by a Family Violence Code of Practice that is online, so that if you have any interactions with the police and you want to know what their role and whether you're being treated correctly is, you can refer to that. And we have numerous people come to us and say, well, actually, you're not doing your job right because this says this, you should be doing this, which is great to be held to account, because some police do need that. So my other notes that I've taken is Brett, when you talked about your sticks and stones saying, that's what I'm trying to talk to or teach members about, that emotional, long-lasting effect, the emotional pain. You know, we can all identify with a fat lip, like unfortunately Kylie got, and that tangible evidence that police are trained to identify evidence, and we put briefs of evidence up to the magistrates court with, you know, property photographs of property damage, medical reports. But we haven't been trained in how do we identify fear and anxiety. And that anxiety is huge, and police dismiss it, unfortunately. Some police. An example I'll give you, I'm full of war stories, but one example, so the Box Hill Sexual Offences and Child Abuse team, as they're known now, sent me through a report for an opinion. They wanted to not authorise a breach of an intervention order. So do you all know what an intervention order is? Mm-hmm. Yep, so my slides do go into intervention orders and the different types of conditions that you can have. Now, this woman got an intervention order on her ex-partner because of harassment by telephone. So he breached it 3 times within a 2-day period by asking her to be her friend on Facebook. So social media, you can request a friend and you get a notification up, on your phone. So he did that, then he would remove it and then do it again another 12 hours, remove it and did it again 12 hours before she went to the police. Because her going about her daily business and seeing his name pop up on her screen, to me, testing, is she going to accept my friendship? Is she going to help me breach this order? Causes her anxiety. So she goes to the police, and the police put in this report and call it technical breach, minor breach, and that the advice given to her initially was you should block him from Facebook. And I just went, oh, that is victim blaming. Why should she have to change her way and block him? I want to challenge that and shift that narrative to you shouldn't be pressing that button. You absolutely know what you're doing when you're pressing the button. I could forgive once, but not 3 times, right? So we have to hold the perpetrators to account because they're just testing the water so that they can see what they can get away with. And that's, I think, my challenge ahead of me for however many years. And then Angelica, I'm going to be a little bit brave like Kylie and just share that I've had shame in that so I'm on my second marriage. I have 2 children, a 19-year-old, 16-year-old. My 19-year-old's just joined the police academy, so I'm very excited. 3 weeks in. And then I've got a 4-year-old to my second husband, and I now live in Selby, so I'm a local. But my first husband was also a police officer, and he was in the surveillance unit where they use tracking devices to track real criminals. And initially, through our first 6 months of relationship, I'd left him because he'd had multiple affairs on me, and the last one I just had enough of because it was with my neighbour who was my best friend at the time. And I moved out with the kids, took them, and he had a tracking device on my car. And when I found it, he just laughed. And I couldn't go to my work and tell them that because at the time I was actually the family violence liaison officer at Dandenong, and I was like, I can't go and report that I'm being stalked by my ex-husband, that's just embarrassing. So I wish I had have had someone who's had Kylie's tuition to be able to identify that at work for those traits. So that's really important, watching your friends and colleagues about their different behaviours, because I know for back then I was drinking heaps, I was, doing risky behaviour just to try and numb the pain. And that's coming from a police officer who should be able to stand up. So I absolutely get about how difficult it is to come to the police about all sorts of stuff. And we've got some beautiful police officers that understand, particularly in our sexual offences and child abuse unit teams. Okay, so that's my tube budget. I've got it up there, but I'll keep going as long as I'm not boring you. So the last murder, talking about all the murders that are in, 1 a week and whatever, the last one that I went to on the road was in Noble Park about 18 months ago, and a 75-year-old male, Russian, had strangled his 70-year-old wife to death in their home at 11 o'clock in the morning. They had no previous contact with the police and no previous history. So he'd done that, he covered her face, excuse me, graphics, but he covered her face with a blanket and then walked down the street, locked the house up, walked down the street to his friend's house who also spoke the same language and told them, oh, I've just killed my wife. And they weren't sure whether to believe him because they just had coffee with the two of them the day before and there was no signs of anything wrong. Mm-hmm. So that couple, then he went walkabout, and then that couple then went to the pharmacist because they knew that he could speak the same language as them. Mm-hmm. And then the pharmacist rang 000 and said, I'm not sure what's really going on, but we think maybe there might be a dead woman at this address. So we've gone there and we found her, and then we found him not 15 minutes later walking the street, just wandering. So in all the risk assessments that we do, I think I'm highlighting this story because we can risk assess, but there is still that underlying, I don't even know what it is, that, they've never come under police, that we're never going to get it right all the time. We're never going to know, and there's still going to be these acts of violence against women that are unexplained. So that's my other... Tamara, the Me Too movement. So I go to lots of meetings with our sexual offences and child abuse team as well, because they go hand in hand. Family violence and sexual offences absolutely go hand in hand. And as of the Family Violence Royal Commission created these family violence reports I talked about, they also have created family violence investigation units, specific units, dedicated detectives onto family violence that work hand in hand with the SOCIT team. And they've also created the Family Violence Command in the city, and then our educational space at the Academy called the Centre for Family Violence, who own me. So, the Me Too movement. Our poor SOCIT detectives have been inundated with a number of, so many more reports because of it, which is fabulous. But our resources, unfortunately, aren't keeping up with it. They haven't been allocated. They're burning out, they're getting stressed, they're crying out for extra resources. So policing and resources, unfortunately, haven't got it right either. So we want to give the best service, but we just don't have enough manpower all the time. But that's, that was just what I wanted to point out about the Me Too movement. I've got a 19-year-old that's being a police officer currently, and I've got a 16-year-old that works over here at Tacoma Macca's, and she wants to be a nurse. Oh. No longer I want her to be a nurse. I want her to be a police officer where she's got weapons and she's got, she's able to protect herself. Because this is not good. I don't want that for
police officers are safer than this.
Yeah,
but
they are.
Working on it. I'll give you my card.
You are the most underpaid profession in the world, and I just put nurses up here, and if they've got to put up with that, which I wouldn't, I would certainly want to smack someone in the mouth if they grabbed me on my boob, and I probably, unless it was my husband, and I probably would. So, I don't want my daughter in that environment. I thank God you're there, paving the way for her, because, anyway, that's what I've got to say about that. And equality as well. Not sure whether you probably know, but we're in our Scandinavian countries where gender equality is even, family violence is low. In places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, third world countries where there's huge gender inequality, there's super high family violence. In Australia, I'm told, I haven't done my own research, but it's sitting in about 3 million. So we've still got such a long way to go, but it absolutely leads to gender equality. Yep, that's my 2 bobs worth about that. And the emergency assaults on emergency services, service workers. So legislation changed, I don't know how many years ago, that offenders are meant to get 6 months mandatory sentencing if they assault an emergency service worker. That is not happening. No. We see it time and time again. And that is the judicial system that is to blame. Victoria Police gung-ho in holding those people to account and taking them to court and charging them with it, and then they're not getting this 6 month sentence imposed. So that's my gripe about that. My slides don't have any sexy police slides on them. They're quite boring. But they do have a slide in there about power and control, which seems to have been the theme. You would have seen this a gazillion times. The Duluth model. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to also talk about, from Nicola, is the image-based sexual abuse. You talked about that anxiety and that hypervigilance that your victims in your studies have. That is what family violence victims feel all the time. That hypervigilance and that anxiety is rife. Okay, so I'll just go back quickly. So some of this will be boring for you. But I guess what I asked Imogen about what she wanted me to talk about, she just said from the police perspective of family violence. So we've got a definition of family violence that's in the Family Violence Protection Act. And it is, family violence is any behaviour that in any way controls or dominates a family member, causes them to feel fear for their own or other family members' safety or well-being. It can include physical, sexual, psychological, emotional or economic abuse, and any behaviour that causes a child to hear, witness or otherwise be exposed to the effects of that behaviour. So it's quite convoluted, but that's what our legislation is. Now, whose family? The name can we kind of throw out to me who you think is classed as a family member? Children, uncle, aunt. Under this legislation, yeah. Grandparent. Cousin, yep. So this 4 or 5 slides is the definition of that governs us on who's a family member. But basically, it means intimate partner, ex-partner, children, sibling, adult children, step family, a relative or extended family, and a carer who is like a family member. And when we're talking about, Koori law, it's even extended a bit further. So when we're getting our intervention orders, it needs to tick one of these boxes in order to get that. Otherwise, it is called a personal safety intervention order, which is under different legislation. Okay, what then is family violence? So you've got the definition up there before. Can anyone yell out to me how they think family violence is committed? We've heard most of it anyway here. How does someone commit family violence? Sorry?
Behind closed doors.
Yes, secret. Yep.
Control, isn't it?
Yeah. Control, coerciveness, isolation. Yep.
And financial control.
Financial control, yeah. Emotional abuse. We've got the sexual, we've got the physical. What was it? Yep. Okay. Gaslighting. Brett's talked about gaslighting. That's huge. Threats of suicide, we've heard about that. So you've ticked off all these boxes. The controlling and coercive behaviours, property to damage to property, intimidation and fear, social isolation, child custody. That is one of our most difficult things to police. When there is family law court orders in place, when there's no family law court orders in place, and one of the parties is withholding the children, we've got to try and unpack that, whether there's a safety issue or if it's a revenge issue. That's one of our most difficult things. And they're so emotive, the people that we're dealing with. Can you imagine if you've done nothing wrong as a father and you're not being allowed to see your child just because your wife didn't like you having an affair? That's not a safety issue, right? That's a revenge issue. So we have to try and unpack that. Withholding medication. This is huge in the elder abuse community. Okay, if you've got a child looking after an elderly parent, they're ciphering money as well. There's normally some financial abuse going on, and then they'll withhold their medication. Even that can be extended as much as people who have a drug addiction. You have 2 people that are addicted to heroin, ice, meth, whatever it is, and one is the supplier. They go and get it. So I'm going to always refer, because that's my natural stance, is that the victim is a woman, and I absolutely acknowledge that it's not always the case, that she'll copper hiding because she doesn't want to get rid of him because he's the one that's going to give her the next hit. Yeah. So that's also very common, that they'll just keep getting battered because of that. Threat of deportation is huge as well in our cultural and linguistically diverse community. Harming pets and threat of, stalking, and homicide. Stalking is a massive precursor to homicide. If you go through the 3 inquests that the Royal Commission looked at, they were all stalked. Sorry to say, you got out.
I was
Gratitude.
lucky.
You were very lucky.
Hooray!
Yes. Okay, gratitude, that's what we're doing, aren't we? We're alive. Okay, so family violence may involve, and we've talked about that, your elder abuse, your technology, facilitated abuse. Adolescent as perpetrator is increasing. Mental health issues are all linked into the one thing. Homosexual partners as well, that threat that they'll out you if you report is also what we're seeing, very common. One of my training bugbears is teaching police to actually speak to children when they go to family violence incidents. Sure. So how are we going to come involved with you? You're going to either walk into the police station or your neighbour or the person who's had family violence committed against them is going to ring us when times of crisis. And there's more often than not children either asleep or in another room, or they're not even there. They've gone and sought refuge at grandma's house or a friend's house because they know that on the weekend mum and dad get on the gas and it's better to be not home. So I'm trying to get police to acknowledge these children and do their own referrals for them, whether they're there or not. Because if our referral agency rings mum after we've been and says, would you like to engage? And she says no, that's it. There's nothing for the children. There's no referrals, no contact with the school unless that child has their own referral. So that's just a rundown of, which is pretty obvious of how family violence can affect children. And then I was going to talk about the brain development. 90% of brain development is prior to 5, and if children are being exposed to trauma and family violence, then it's their emotional growth part of their brain is not getting regulated, which leads to PTSD, anxiety, depression. I think it's already been touched on tonight anyway. And when you scan their brain, it has an effect like an Alzheimer's patient. It's very similar. So it's a real, and it can happen in the womb. Cycle of violence, don't really need to go into that. That's your Duluth wheel that you've got is all about power and control. And these on the outside of the spokes of the wheel, that is just all the different ways and the techniques that perpetrators can use when trying to gain power. Okay, the risks. So this, the MARAM and the 39 questions that police now have to ask everybody tries to drag out whether further family violence is going to occur by, these are the risk factors, whether or not someone's pregnant or they've got a newborn, someone's got suicidal thoughts, mental illness, disability, they've got isolation, substance abuse, financial difficulties, that before, during and after separation, particularly after separation, as we saw with Hannah, unfortunately, and the escalation of severity frequency. So this document that we've got predicts family violence in the next 12 months. And if the score's high, then it goes up to our family violence investigation unit, the detectives, to get a specialised response, which is fantastic. It's something that we've never had before. So we're moving in the right direction. Factors that increase future threat for a victim. Whether if someone's contravened an order, that attempted strangulation is another massive precursor to murder. All these inquests before, other than Luke Batty, all had strangulation leading up to it. Threats to kill the children, the victim, threats, we've been through most of those. We've been stalked. The perpetrator's unemployed, it's a higher risk. If they've threatened other family members, they use alcohol and drugs, and they've been violent to others in the past. So another one of our scoring is that Joe Bloggs could have, had a fight down the pub and broken someone's nose 2 years ago. That then will help us score highly on this risk assessment for this incident with this victim today, because he's shown a propensity for violence in the past. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yep. And what our role is to keep you safe, obviously, but it's now to give you support. And we're the conduit to all these support agencies. We go to the scene, we can gather in all this information, not just the information we want to hear, but all of this information to then give it to the support agency to best help this family. And a perfect example, very minor, is a couple that had a fight, and it was all about financial hardship that the family had been having. And a young constable put on the report that they were having financial difficulties, and a support agency sent the family food vouchers just to relieve that pressure in the interim till advice could get to them. So it's just a way that we can help, but the agency wouldn't have known that had this police officer not put it in the report. Mm-hmm. So it's just an important piece of the puzzle that police are now trained to do. Obviously, we need to identify and investigate criminal offences, but we also want to investigate that power and control and what that looks like, and then take out an intervention order, because there's no offence to control someone. But if you put in an intervention order, there is. And then we can then charge them and use our police powers, which that's what drives police. They actually want to prosecute people and take them to court, because that's what their work is. They don't like doing work when there's no result, as probably nobody does. But so I try and say, if you get that intervention order in place for that victim, then the next time you go there, you can hold them to account and take them to court. If they keep breaching an intervention order, they end up being remanded. And if they have a short taste in a police jail, it is proven in America that they are less likely to reoffend. For the not so bad people, okay? You get extremes that an intervention order is not going to stop them anyway. So prevention and deterrence. So we're doing a lot of work in this space, and just this might be an example of some of the work that we do in our own time. I don't think I'm going to go through those. Just quickly, we have three options when we go to an intervention when we go to a family violence incident, or we get one reported over the counter at the police station. We have criminal proceedings where we can charge somebody, we can remand them, bail them, we can put them on summons. And then we have our civil processes of getting an intervention order, the family violence safety notices. You can get a complaint, an application and a warrant. If you can't find the person, we actually have a power of entry into a place where we think they might be hiding out, to go and find them just to serve the intervention order. And then your application and your summons. If there's already an order in place and you feel like the conditions need to be changed in any way or made more stringent, then we can do an application to vary that order. And then we've just got referrals. So every matter should be referred to, but some cases, because everybody has conflict in a relationship, and sometimes police do attend when a criminal offence hasn't been committed and the intervention order isn't warranted. So we do go there sometimes, and some people say, we just had an argument and the neighbours overheard it. So we can then at least we just put in a referral and our job is done. Okay? These are all different conditions that can go on an intervention order, which I won't go over. Types of intervention orders we've touched on, and obviously in all cases of emergency, call 000. Otherwise, each station has a family violence liaison officer. So if you were to ring Belgrave Police Station and ask for their family violence sergeant, they will have a specific trained sergeant that will be able to guide you in the right direction, whether it's for advice or your own situation, somebody at work. You can ring any station and they will have one allocated to them, and they may put you in touch with someone like myself. That is it. I did put up their questions, but apparently you're not doing them tonight, you're doing them tomorrow. So ignore that.
Thanks, Cassie. That was awesome.
Thank you.